Part 2, why you should always keep a weapon in your car for self-defense. After he put his hand on my thigh, I was so terrified that I froze for a few seconds. He told me to be quiet and stop moving so much as he ran his hand higher up my thigh. The stretch of road I was driving on was empty and no one was around. When I first started driving for Uber, my dad had gotten me a taser to keep in my car in case of emergencies that I stored in my sunglasses compartment. I snapped out of my fear, pulling off to the side of the road and grabbing the taser. I tried to get out of the car, but he got out as well and grabbed me. That's when I tased him for a few good seconds until he let go and dropped to the ground. As I jumped back in my car and locked the doors, he got up and started pounding on my driver's side window. I quickly drove off and called 911. My heart was pounding and I could barely make out any words. The dispatcher calmed me down as I explained what happened. The police found him and arrested him for assault. I later got a call saying that he had a warrant and record of sexual assault. The police told me that they had been called around where the bar was for a man who had assaulted a woman earlier that day. However, when they got to the scene, he had already left, which was when I unknowingly picked him up. After this incident, I stopped driving for Uber, and now I always carry a taser with me everywhere I go. Crime Fanatic Friday, the Ken and Barbie killers. Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka seemed like the perfect 80s power couple. However, there was nothing perfect about this deadly and psychotic duo. Paul attended the University of Toronto where his sadism began to bloom. He began abusing his girlfriends and sexually assaulting women in the Scarborough area in 1987. He abducted his victims from bus stops and brutally assaulted them. The media dubbed him as a Scarborough rapist. Around this time is when he met Carla. She was 17 and he was 23. She was the oldest of 3 girls, blonde and beautiful. Paul and Carla found a shared interest for sadomasochism and quickly fell into the role of master and slave. Paul took a liking to Carla's younger sister, Tammy, and as time went on, he developed a fixation for taking her virginity. Carla, the obedient slave, finally hatched a plan to give Paul what he always wanted. At the family Christmas party, Carla and Paul gave Tammy a few cocktails laced with sedative. Once everyone was asleep, the couple took Tammy to the basement. Carla held a rag soaked with an anesthetic that she had stolen from a vet clinic she worked at over Tammy's nose and mouth. The couple began raping her unconscious body and recording it. During the assault, Tammy vomited and aspirated on it, choking to death. They cleaned her up, put her to bed, and called the EMTs. However, their deadly tirade didn't stop here. Crime Fanatic Friday Part 2, the Ken and Barbie killers. Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka got away with murdering Carla's younger sister. The police believe that Tammy had simply drank too much and choked on her vomit. Their next victim was a Jane Doe that Carla knew from a pet store. Carla invited her out for a fun night and laced her drinks. The couple took her home, gave her an anesthetic, and brutally assaulted her unconscious body. She woke up the next morning sore and sick but with no memory of what happened. 2 weeks before their wedding, they kidnapped a 14-year-old girl and held her captive for days, torturing and assaulting her, all while videotaping it. However, this time they had run out of anesthetic. So instead, they killed her, dismembered her body, and encased the pieces in cement. Carla then dumped the pieces in Lake Gibson. A few days later, the pieces were found. While the police investigated the crime, Paul and Carla were honeymooning in Hawaii. In 1992, the couple abducted another young girl from a church parking lot and committed the same acts to her before killing her. They dumped her body in a ditch. Around this time, Paul started abusing Carla. Her parents convinced her to press charges against him, and she did. This is when the task force started questioning Carla after noticing her Mickey Mouse watch that belonged to one of the deceased girls. Carla made a plea deal against Paul in return for a manslaughter charge and 12 years. Paul was given 25 years in Canada's toughest maximum security prison. Storytime about how my dad tried to kill me. When I was a kid, my dad was very abusive towards me and my mother. He was an alcoholic and a drug user, and he would beat us almost every night. Most nights, we would sleep in the car because we were too afraid to go home. My mom was terrified of throwing him out because he would make crazy threats like telling us he'd burn the house down with us inside if she ever tried to leave him. Eventually, when I was 12 years old, she built up the courage to do it. She packed his things while he wasn't home and changed the locks. He was furious. Over the next few years, we had to call the police a total of 73 times because he wouldn't leave us alone. When I turned 14, he stopped and he was radio silent for the next 4 years. Fast forward to when I was 18, I was contacted by an old family member who told me that my dad was sick. They also told me that he didn't have much longer left to live. As badly as he hurt us in the past, he was still my dad and I wanted to make peace with him before he passed away. I wrote him a letter, found his current address, and went to post it. As I reached the front door, he opened it. He told me he was just about to commit suicide and wanted me to come inside and talk. I felt sorry for him and I walked in. As soon as I stepped foot inside, he slammed the door and locked it. This is when my nightmare began. Part 2 of how my dad tried to kill me. For the next 3 hours, he tortured me endlessly and beat me. During this time, the realization had set in that he was never dying and it was just a ploy to lure me in. I was in agonizing pain and I thought that I was going to die. He kept spewing hateful words and telling me that he was going to kill me. He had dragged me upstairs and at one point he threw me down the staircase. When I reached the bottom, my head smashed through a window. He was at the top of the steps, looking at me, and I knew he was about to come down and finish the job. I felt like I was going to pass out, but the last bit of fight I had left in me saw the side door and made a run for it. By some miracle, the door was unlocked and I managed to escape. As I sprinted home, I could hear his footsteps running behind me for half of the journey, but the adrenaline coursing through my veins was pushing me. My lungs were on fire, but I knew that if he got a hold of me, that would be it. He eventually stopped running after me and I made it home. I suffered extensive injuries both physically and mentally. A week later, I found out that he slit his friend's throat the same night inside of a store, but luckily he survived too. When I was 19, he was sentenced to 11 years in prison for that attempted murder. I never went to the police because I was scared and naive, but I'm 24 now and healing. Storytime about my roommate's crazy girlfriend. I'm a lesbian living with my good friend who's a guy. I own the apartment and rent out the room to him. A month ago, he met a girl online and they started dating. She's constantly at our place, and I'll be honest, I don't like her. She's always been incredibly rude and standoffish towards me. I eventually learned that it's because she thought I had a thing for my roomie, even after he told her I was gay, to which she replied that I don't look gay. A few weeks ago at a kickback at our place, I pulled her aside, telling her that I really am gay and I hope that we could be friends. She seemed to take this very well and was overly friendly with me for the rest of the night. The next day, my roommate wanted to talk to me, saying that his girlfriend feels uncomfortable around me after I drunkenly hit on her. What? I wasn't drunk at all, and I'm not attracted to her whatsoever. I explained to my roommate what really happened, and he was skeptical, but took my word for it, chalking it up to a miscommunication. A week later, we had another kickback, and his girlfriend was there, of course. I was cordial, but stayed away so another miscommunication wouldn't happen. Towards the end of the night, another friend said to me, "Dude, what's going on? She's telling everyone that you've been hitting on her all night." I was pissed off and went up to her in front of everyone saying, "What the hell's going on? Why are you speaking lies about me hitting on you to all my friends?" Part 2 of my roommate's crazy girlfriend. She stared at me, unable to respond. Then I said, "Just because I'm gay doesn't mean that I'm into you. Trust me, I'm not the least bit interested in you." She started sobbing and spewing BS, so I kicked her out and told her that she's not welcome anymore for making me uncomfortable in my own apartment. Her and my roommate both left, and he was super pissed at me. He didn't come back for a while, but I got some angry texts. However, I stood my ground about her not being welcome anymore. I told him he was free to stay or move out as he pleases. Most of her friends were on my side. Nearly a week later, my roommate returned home and he was giving me the silent treatment. I figured I'd just leave him alone and let him get over it. Then his girlfriend started calling me and demanding that I give the phone to him because he apparently wasn't speaking to her. I told her to kick rocks and that I wasn't getting in their business anymore. Soon after, my roommate finally started talking to me again. Turns out, they got into a huge blowout fight and his girlfriend admitted that she wanted me to flirt with her just to prove that she could pull a lesbian. He told her that was messed up and then broke up with her on the spot. She wouldn't stop blowing up our phones for weeks until I finally blocked her number. It's been a few months and my roommate moved out. We're definitely not as close, but we're still good friends. His ex-girlfriend recently came out as bisexual on social media. How ironic. Story time about how a stranger tried to trick me into joining a swingers club. I woke up late one morning for class and I was in a rush. I threw on a hoodie and some leggings and ran out of the house looking like a mess. When I got to my car, I noticed it was raining outside, but despite this, I was still speeding trying to make it on time. This idea turned out to be as bad as it sounds, and I ended up rear-ending an SUV. I was super broke at the time and didn't have money to pay any sort of deductible. The guy I hit introduced himself as John and made sure that I was okay. To my surprise, he acted like it was no big deal and told me not to worry about the small amount of damage. He immediately got off topic and asked me if I'd be interested in going to a women empowerment seminar that he was hosting. When I politely declined, he told me that he'd only forget about the damage to his SUV if I attended one of the classes. He started ranting about how he's trying to help people and empower women and explained that he's trying to expand his classes. I agreed and he gave me a flyer with the information. I showed up late to a meeting and discovered pretty quickly that it wasn't as innocent as John advertised. Everyone there seemed a bit off, and John was going over various techniques of how to intimately empower women. I also noticed the people I was sitting next to were giving me intimate looks. It only got weirder from here. Part 2 of how a stranger tried to trick me into joining a swingers club. John told me the class was all about empowering women, but this wasn't what I had in mind. I finally got up to leave and John immediately noticed. He saw me in the small audience and told the rest of the class to welcome me and explained how I agreed to attend one session. All eyes were on me at this point, so I decided to sit back down and put the attention back on the instructor. He then continued explaining various methods on how to intimately empower women and couples. Next, he picked two people, a man and a woman, to come up to the front of the class to demonstrate. It was kind of like a train wreck that I didn't want to see, but I couldn't look away. At the end of the class, John led us to another room where full-blown activities were going on, if you know what I mean. That's when it finally hit me that this was some type of swingers club. I immediately slid out from the crowd and headed towards the door. That's when John caught up with me and handed me a flyer for the next event. I went home in disbelief and told my roommate about what just happened. I told her about the car wreck, how I got tricked into going to this crazy class, and about that weirdo John. Her reaction was the exact opposite of what I thought it would be. She told me it sounded cool and asked for the flyer. She ended up going to the next class with her boyfriend and is now a regular with John's group. I have feelings for my coworker, but I'm engaged. I work in the medical field in a busy hospital. It feels like we've been short-staffed forever and it never seems to improve. This leads to us having to work double shifts almost daily. The money's great, but I'm rarely ever home. Sometimes we even sleep at the hospital and don't go home for days at a time. The people I work with are amazing and almost like family. At the moment, I see them more than my actual family. We all look out for each other and we're super close. But some of us might be a little too close. There's this guy I work with named Jason that I've developed feelings for. When you're with someone almost 16 hours a day, I guess it's bound to happen. The problem is that I'm already engaged to my fiance at home. It started out innocent at first. Casual, light flirting here and there, so subtle at times I didn't even think anything of it. One of those situations where you start out as friends, but things keep progressing. I knew my relationship was in jeopardy when Jason and I started texting when we weren't working. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't stop the conversations. If I'm being honest, at times I would be the one to text first and take the conversation away from the friend zone. I haven't talked to my fiance about it and I'm scared to death too. I still love him and feel terrible that I have feelings for someone else, and I haven't even gotten to the worst part of it all. This is why you should be careful working in food delivery. When the pandemic hit, I lost my job and signed up to work for a food delivery app. I was making good money and the tips were nice too. During the first few months of working, I never had any weird experiences or customers. For the most part, everything was fine. There were times when I was a little scared of dropping off the food because it was in sketchy neighborhoods or it was dark outside, but nothing ever happened. I started feeling confident in my position and I let my guard down. One night, I got a delivery request and the tip was bigger than the total order. When I looked at the details of how to drop it off, I realized why the tip was so big. The instructions asked if I could open the door and bring it inside of the house as they were bedbound and unable to walk to the door. I knew I shouldn't do it. It was super against company policy, but I had an aunt who was bedbound and it hit a soft spot. When I opened the door of the house, I was hit with the most vile stench that's ever hit my nose. I looked around and called out to the customer. It was silent for a few seconds. Suddenly, someone croaked out, "I'm back here, come on down." The voice came from a bedroom down the hallway that was pitch black. As I walked towards the room, my stomach was turning. I entered the room and put the order down, but I didn't see anyone. When I turned around to leave, suddenly a man appeared in front of me. Part 2 of why you should be careful working in food delivery. This man was tall, wore glasses, and was balding. He was also fully functional from what I could tell. In this moment, I realized how badly I had messed up. I was cornered away from the doorway. He thanked me for dropping off his order. I politely replied, "You're welcome," and tried to step around him to leave. He took a step in the same direction at the same exact moment and asked me what I was up to for the rest of the night. My heart was pounding out of my chest, but I quickly replied that I had another order to drop off and that they were waiting, so I had to go. However, he didn't move. Somehow, I mustered up enough courage to step towards him and say, "Excuse me, I really have to go." His hand was on the door and I knew he was either going to let me go or shut it and attack me. He stared at me for a moment, then hesitated and stepped out of the way. I quickly slipped past him and made a beeline for the front door. As I twisted the doorknob, I heard his footsteps running towards me. I swiftly opened the door, slammed it behind me, and sprinted towards my car. I felt the adrenaline rushing through my veins. I looked back to see if he was running after me, but he was just standing in the doorway, watching me run away with a smirk on his face. I never should have gone inside for a delivery and I never will again. Crime Fanatic Friday, how my sister tried to kill me and my younger siblings. Growing up, my sister Stacy was never mean. She adored me and my siblings, and she was even like a mom to us since ours was mostly absent from our lives. We lived with my dad and grandma, who did their best to make sure that we had a good relationship with our half-siblings. My sister went to go live with our mom because she wanted a relationship with her. After this, I hardly ever saw her until one weekend when my grandma decided to let me go spend the weekend at my mom's. That weekend, my sister was crying out for help when she was beaten by my mom's boyfriend. She ran to my grandma's house, who lives over an hour away, but decided to come back. When she got back home, she was sick and throwing up blood. She asked my mom to take her to the ER, but my mom just shrugged it off and told her that she was being dramatic. This is when my mom decided to go out drinking with her boyfriend and force my sister to babysit me and my younger siblings. I was 5 years old and my siblings were 1, 2, and 4. My sister reached her breaking point and lost it. She completely trashed the trailer home and broke everything into pieces before turning her attention to us. She tied us up, gagged us with clothes, and duct tape over our mouths. This is when we heard gunshots, followed by the smell of smoke before passing out. Crime Fanatic Friday Part 2, how my sister tried to kill me and my younger siblings. After smelling the smoke, my little sister and I passed out. I remember waking up in the ambulance and finding out that my older sister Stacy had found my mom's gun. She started firing it off at the ceiling of our home and then lit the couch on fire, trying to set fire to the trailer with us in it. Then she went outside and called the police. She told me she had fallen asleep and 2 men had broken into our trailer trying to rob us. She told me that they had hit her in the head with a gun, and when she regained consciousness, she ran outside because she saw us. Nobody can save me now. Nobody can take the pain away. Everything is falling down. So this is my escape. Stacy passed away last year from heart trauma and depression. She was only 25 years old. The news article shot all the details out and she had had a complex. Her life was amazing and she was crying out for help, but no one ever saw her. I've forgiven her for the video. I love her and I wish her